Hey, deep divers. Ready to dive into something kind of controversial?
Always up for a challenge.
All right, great. Um, Today, we're looking at college admissions, specifically how well the SAT and high school GPA actually predict college success.
Mm-hmm.
We always hear debates about the SAT. Is it fair? Is it biased? But this research takes it a step further.
Yeah.
It examines how accurately those scores predict college performance. And get this, it suggests things aren't so straightforward.
Really?
Yeah, well, it looks like it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Oh, interesting. Not one size fits all. So what do you mean by that? Like different for different students?
Exactly. Like the accuracy can change based on, well, a bunch of factors.
Ah, okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so this research is done by Guinness, Culpepper, and Pierce, and they look at a massive sample size.
A Guinness, like a...
Like the beer, yeah.
Okay.
So they had over 300,000 students across 176 different colleges.
Wow, 176 colleges. That's a lot of data points. So they weren't just looking at like overall averages then.
No, they dug way deeper. They were looking at something called differential prediction generalization.
Differential prediction generalization. Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
Well, it basically means, how much those SAT predictions can change depending on the specific school. So, like, the SAT might be pretty accurate at, say, big state university, but be totally off at small liberal arts college.
Oh, that makes sense. So like it's not just random variation.
Right. Even after, accounting for how selective the schools are, average SAT scores, even things like grading practices.
Yeah.
There were still these big differences in how well the SAT predicted grades. Like, we're talking differences as big as, get this, half a point on a 4.0 scale.
Half a point? Whoa, that's huge.
Right. It's like the SAT is speaking a different language at each school.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So it really challenges the idea that the SAT is this like universal measure of college readiness,
Totally. It's more like, the relationship between SAT score, GPA, and actual college performance can be totally different depending on the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes you wonder what's at the root of all this, right? Like, what's causing these crazy variations?
I know, right? It's the million-dollar question.
Well, the researchers, they explored a few possible explanations. And some of them are really interesting, thought-provoking even.
Okay. Lay it on me.
All right. One factor they looked at was, have you heard of stereotype threat?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that the idea that like if you're aware of a negative stereotype about your group, it can actually like mess with your performance?
Yeah, like girls are bad at math, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. But how does that like play into this?
Well, they think the stereotype threat might impact students differently on different campuses.
Yeah.
Like, some schools might have environments that kind of make it worse, while others might actually lessen it.
Interesting. So the same student takes the SAT, gets the same score, but their actual performance in college could vary a lot depending on the school's environment.
Exactly. And it's not just stereotypes. The researchers also looked at how cultural differences might affect how students approach testing.
Like how different cultures view the whole testing thing.
Right, like some cultures might emphasize memorization, which could help on parts of the SAT, while others might focus more on, like, creative problem solving.
Yeah, I see. So it's not just about smarts, it's about how your background prepares you for this very specific test.
Exactly. It's about more than just, like, inherent ability. You know what I mean?
I do. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of grading leniency.
Oh, yeah. Some schools are definitely easier graders than others. Could that be messing with these predictions?
Oh, absolutely. The researchers pointed out that if a school has a policy of, like, boosting grades for certain groups of students, it could skew the whole relationship between SAT scores and actual performance.
So a student's high GPA might not actually reflect their mastery of the material. Like, it's inflated, so the SAT looks like it's under-predicting their success.
Yeah, that's the idea. And that could be happening at some schools and not others, which just makes things even more complicated.
Okay, so we've got stereotype threat, cultural differences, and grading leniency all playing a role here. What other factors did this research uncover?
Well, they also looked at, like, the programs and resources colleges offer, especially those aimed at supporting students from underrepresented groups.
Oh, you mean like mentoring programs or special scholarships for first-generation college students, things like that?
Exactly. Those kinds of initiatives can have a really big impact on a student's success. But here's the thing. Those programs, they aren't equally effective at every school.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like a mentoring program at a small, supportive college is probably going to have a bigger impact than a a similar program at a giant university.
Right. And some schools just, have more robust support systems in place, and that could lead to better outcomes for students regardless of their SAT scores.
Right. It's all about the context. This
Exactly.
is so fascinating. It's like we can't just look at the SAT in isolation. We have to consider the whole environment a student's going into.
Exactly. And, one last factor they brought up was course difficulty.
Course difficulty. You mean like some schools just have harder classes than others?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. It's about how those courses are structured, who takes them, how grades are distributed. Think about those like weed out courses in certain
Oh,
majors.
yeah, like the class is designed to like filter out students.
Right, exactly. And so if certain groups of students are more likely to end up in those really tough courses, it could affect their GPA, and then it looks like the SAT is a less accurate predictor for them.
That's a really good point. So it's not just the overall difficulty of a school, it's about how that difficulty is like distributed.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like the researchers didn't like pinpoint one single cause for these variations, huh?
No, not really. It's more of this like complex interplay of all these factors. Stereotypes, culture, grading, resources, course difficulty, it all matters.
All right, so we've established that the SAT isn't a perfect predictor
Mm.
and that its accuracy can vary a lot from school to school. So what does this all mean for students, parents, colleges?
Well, for colleges, I think the biggest takeaway is they need to be really careful about relying too heavily on the SAT, especially if they haven't really investigated these biases and variations within their own student population.
So they shouldn't just assume the SAT is equally accurate for all their applicants, right?
Right. They need to analyze their data, look for patterns, see how these factors are playing out at their school. It's about taking a more nuanced approach to admissions.
And what about for students? What should we be doing with this information?
Well, if you're a student or the parent of a student thinking about college, this research raises some important questions. How does your dream school use the SAT? Have they checked for these kinds of biases in their data? It might be worth doing some digging.
It's like, don't just obsess over your score. Look deeper at how each school interprets those scores.
Right, exactly. And don't be afraid to ask those tough questions during college visits or information sessions. Ask them about their support programs for different student groups. Ask them how they factor in things like course difficulty and grading variations.
So it's about finding the right fit for you academically and socially.
Exactly. And remember, the SAT is just one beta point. It's not the be-all, end-all of your application. Focus on building a strong overall profile with good grades, challenging coursework, and activities you're passionate about.
Right. Show them who you are, beyond just the numbers.
Exactly. And if you're really concerned about the SAT, look into colleges that are test optional or test blind.
Oh, yeah. That's where they either give you the option of submitting scores or they don't consider them at all.
Exactly, yeah. There's a growing movement toward those policies, and the research on their effectiveness is actually quite encouraging. Studies show that students admitted to test-optional colleges tend to do just as well as their peers who submitted scores.
Wow. So in a lot of cases, the SAT might not have even been a good predictor anyway. It's kind of liberating to think that other factors like motivation, work ethic, love of learning might actually matter more.
Absolutely. It's about finding the right measures for success, recognizing that talent comes in many forms, and it benefits everyone when we have a system that values diversity and looks beyond just one standardized test.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. What stands out to you from all of this? We'll be back in a moment to wrap up our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've been talking about this research and how the SAT might not be the most reliable predictor of college success, and how things get even more complicated when you look at differences between schools and students.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about all those factors that can influence those differences, like stereotype threat, how different cultures view testing, and even how leniently schools grade.
Right, exactly. It's like this tangled web of influences, making it tough to really know what's predicting success.
Mm.
But one thing I've been thinking about is the legal side of this. You mentioned earlier that colleges can get in trouble for, adjusting their admissions process based on race or gender, even if they're trying to be more inclusive.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It gets to the heart of those debates around affirmative action in college admissions. You see, in the U.S., there are laws that make it illegal to use different admissions standards or prediction models for different racial or gender groups, even if the goal is a more diverse student body.
Wow, so even if a college had good intentions, they could still face legal challenges.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very sensitive area. The law is trying to prevent reverse discrimination, where, a majority group might claim they were unfairly disadvantaged by policies that benefit minority groups.
So colleges are in this, like, tough spot. They want to promote diversity, but they have to work within a legal framework that limits how they can consider a student's race or gender. It feels like a catch-22.
It is. It is. And that's why this research is so important. It pushes us to find better ways to build a more equitable admissions process. Strategies that go beyond just like tweaking test scores or setting different cutoffs for different groups.
So what are some of those strategies? Like, what's the alternative to relying so much on the SAT or ACT?
Well, like we talked about earlier, diversifying the criteria used in admissions is huge. Looking at a student's whole application package, their essays, recommendations, activities, it gives a much richer picture than just a test score.
It's about seeing the whole student, not just a number.
Exactly. And colleges can also focus on building more inclusive environments, especially for students from underrepresented groups. Once they're admitted, this could involve things like robust mentoring programs, tutoring services, creating spaces where students connect with others who share their background.
It's like shifting the focus from just getting students into college to making sure they can thrive once they're there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about fostering a sense of belonging, building a community where everyone feels valued and empowered to reach their full potential.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. Wow. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the complexities of college admissions. What about you, listeners? What are your biggest takeaways from all of this? This research really highlights how important context is. A test score is just one data point, and it should never be looked at on its own. It's about seeing the whole student, understanding their background, their experiences, and considering how all of that might influence their success in a particular school environment. So if you're a student or a parent navigating this college admissions process, remember to ask questions. Ask colleges how they use test scores, how they deal with potential biases, what support systems they have for students from diverse backgrounds. Finding the right college fit, it's about so much more than just getting accepted. It's about finding a place where you can learn, grow, and thrive as yourself. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the things that matter to you.